What's up, y'all? This week 4, and once again, it's Dr. J and
Dr. K,
and we're back to give you another reaction and review to week 4 of HBO's In Treatment. Moving on to one of my favorite characters, which is Laila. Absolutely, just feel for this young lady. Just observation, we have seen Laila go from this young lady who was bold, that was wearing these bright colors, who was full of energy, she was woke and all of these things, to sort of like a wilted flower. And we noticed like her hair has changed, her clothing is all black, and she's really having a problem with deciphering the fantasy world for her in Cara versus the reality in which she lived in. We see that it's regression taking place, that she does not want to move forward with going to college. We find out a little more backstory about Cara, that she was her camp counselor, 16-year-old connecting with a 13-year-old, which is problematic, but it all ties into that. We also hear that she doesn't believe that her father loves her, that he loves to work, and that her grandma is in love with the idea of her, but doesn't really have a voice. She wants Brooke to kind of discipline her, control her during the sessions. And then the trigger for me was when she basically started saying that she is going to give all of her material things away because they mean nothing. That's a trigger for me because as a young man, I remember a young man in high school that I thought just had the world handed to him. And I remember he started giving away his most personal items. And a week later, that young man drove his car off the road and crashed into a tree and killed himself. And I just remember that really being a part of sticking to my psyche as a young man. And the moment that I saw that, I was like, this young lady is planning on killing herself. She feels that she, has no options. So what my question for you is this: typically when we think about teen suicide in African American communities, we have this belief, and I want to say a false myth, that young Black people do not commit suicide. They were saying that, we just don't kill ourselves. So what do you think is going on with this character? First I want to dispel that myth. And then what do you think is leading to Laila having these sort of suicidal thoughts?
Well, I mean, she's overwhelmed. She's completely overwhelmed. You see that just from the moment she walks in to sessions, meeting Brooke with her grandmother, just how demanding the grandmother is. When she insists on her coming out, she's blowing the horn, she's intrusive. Like, there's no space to breathe, there's no space to be herself. And when she's, again, I think we talked about last time, trying to leave home at 5 to find her mother, getting on a train or a plane, wherever, to go somewhere else. Like, this idea of escape, like, it's too much. It's too much, and nobody's listening to her. Nobody's asking her. And she doesn't even know how to. I mean, Brooke says that you don't know how to talk about yourself. Like, you'll talk about everything else and everyone else, and she'll get on a big soapbox about life and talking to Gen X and Ys and boomers. Like, so she has a lot to say, but nothing about herself. And she's not in touch with herself. And I think, interestingly, when you mentioned about African American communities, number one, we don't do therapy because we feel like that's leisurely, or like that's for other people. But I think even that idea of who we are as individuals, what our feelings are, what our thoughts are coming into our own, we don't take the time to do that. I think we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to do that because we feel like you just need to work, just get over it, and so we just push, and that's the discussion we had last week of this idea of producing, but there's no real success, having things, but there's no real peace. And I think you mentioned it, not just surviving, but thriving. And so we don't do that enough. We don't do that enough in our community to think about peace. Maslow talks about these hierarchy of needs. And then there are theories, talking about self-actualization and just coming into your own, and, what are your goals, like higher order things in life, as opposed to I'm just going to work every day. And I think she's in that space. And she hasn't been allowed to do something more, to find out who she is, what she wants to do. And because that's been snuffed, then it's like she's a caged animal. Like, if I can't be as free and vibrant as I want to be, then I'd rather just end it all. And it's sad. It's really sad. And I think, sadly, I feel like people would be like, that's white folks' problem, or that's first world problem, that kind of thing. But I don't know. We got to get beyond just the Monday, just the everyday, just making it. There's more to life than that. And she hasn't been given that opportunity. And I could see from the parents' point of view, where parent and grandparent, like, well, we're providing everything for you.
Right. That's what I was about to say about the dad.
Yeah, so they feel like they're giving things, but they're not giving time. They're not giving relationship. So then when Brooke asks her what is love, she doesn't know what love is. But to a degree, I felt like she kind of got it. Like, love is just, like she said, seeing you, appreciating you for who you are, not what you do and what you have. But their relationship is very transactional.
Yeah, but you know what I would say, and this goes back to other episodes that we had. This is the pressure of what it takes to be a successful Black family, in a sense. When we move our kids from like marginalized communities to the suburbs, then it's pressure for your kids to assimilate, to get good grades, to, in a sense, stay woke. So they have to be conscious, but yet they live in an environment that will not really support their culture. They have to do that. They have to produce all of these things as symbols of success. And then when I think about what she says about the dad, like, the dad doesn't love me, he provides. But the thing that I always say with dads, now keep in mind, we haven't met this character, but if we look at like the work of Ronald Mincy and that sort of thing, and his work, he often talks about how dads have been reduced to producers. So we think that as fathers, all we need to do is provide. And what is he doing? He providing his daughter with private school, luxury clothes. She get the best cars. He's thinking that he's doing the right thing. And she got into Berkeley. She got into every school.
And far more than the mom did. We don't even know where she is.
Right. So the thing that I think that is so painful, that you can do everything right and still be wrong.
Yeah, right. I mean, and you gotta, what is right? Because I think the underlying issue is parents not communicating with their kids and tapping into who they are and what they need. Because it does, I'm glad she at least had some tangible things, but it could be a family that's not well off. You can have an intact family, middle class, they can be any class of whatever or configuration of family. If there's no communication, if there's no love, and I'm seeing you and I'm appreciating you, then I think the same thing could happen. And I think hers is more kind of in your face because she has so much stuff. And then it's like, well, what are you sad about? Well, what are you upset about? Because my mama's not here, because y'all aren't listening to me, and I'm doing all these things that I don't really want to do. I'm just going with the motions.
But you got but you got more than the average Black person has.
Yeah, but it still doesn't tap into what your spirit needs. And I think that's an issue. And then another thing I just thought about, were you surprised that she met Kara, or say she did, at this church camp, and it was a Black church? And there was something about when she said, typical Black churches, and I don't know how she described it, but I just didn't put her there. I didn't situate her within the Black church. And then if we do, then you gotta think about all the messages regarding same-sex relationships. And so, could that have been something that brought them together all that time? I don't know. I think it's just layered, in so many ways, where we have to stuff or ignore important parts of ourselves just to fit in. It's ironic, for as free as African American families and culture want to say that we are, we can still be stifling, and real constricting about the roles that we put people in. That's a whole dissertation, but
you know what? And just to add on to that, as we wrap up this segment up, it just reminds me also of what Laila was saying, that they really had a different take on spirituality. It wasn't that they didn't believe in God, but what they believed in was, they were looking at different forms of spirituality. And in particular, one thing that speaks out to me is that she talked about the Egyptians and their relationship with death. And she basically said that the Egyptians would oftentimes drag up their ancestors and have them as a part of the conversation and that sort of thing. And it kind of ties back in to her maybe wanting to commit suicide, because maybe she feels that this would be the only space where they can hear her voice when she's gone. So, that's just, and that may be just me reading into it, but it's just that idea of the ancestors have a voice that no one can critique, no one can question, because they have gone on to the afterlife, but their presence is still here. I think that's what she kind of wants, that sort of space. And, it's going to be interesting to see this, with this young lady.